That's not baptism.
No.
Taking the baby to the priest, putting a drop of water or oil on the baby's head, that's not baptism. Baptism, the word baptize, baptismo, means to be submerged. Means to be completely under the water. Covered by water, and that's important. You must be covered. The reason why you must be completely covered or submerged under the water is because baptism is symbolic of death. The water represents the grave. So you can't put a dot of water on somebody's head. You cannot sprinkle water on somebody's head and be baptism, because in order to be baptized, baptismal, submerged, you must be completely under the water. Every part of you must be under the water, because the water represents death. It represents the grave. You must be in the grave. This is a part of salvation. You cannot come to Christ and bypass the grave. You cannot serve Jesus. You cannot love Jesus. Loose my tongue in the name of Jesus. You cannot love Jesus and bypass the grave.
Yes.
The grave is a part of the journey.
Yes.
There can be no resurrection if there is no life. I didn't say that right. There can be no resurrection if there is no death. In order for there to be a resurrection, there must first be death. Water baptism represents that death. Because a lot of times we don't realize what happens to us when we get saved. All we know is we stood before the pastor and we said what the pastor said, because the word that the pastor preached touched our heart, and so we wanted to give our life to Christ, and we give our life to Christ. But there's so much involved in that process. And that's one of the reasons why when you get saved, you need to come to church. Because when you come to church, the pastor has now the opportunity to begin to unpack all of the stuff that took place when you stood up there. You didn't know what happened. See, sometimes, and this happens to me a lot, in Sunday, especially in Sunday school, I tell you, you hear me say all the time, I don't have time. I don't have time to go down that line. Why? Because there are sometimes when I'm teaching, the wealth of knowledge hits me about a particular issue. And I know if I begin to talk about that issue, it's going to take me down a road, and I'm going to completely lose or miss where we're at right now. So I say I don't have time to go down that road, because if I go down that road, it's going to take us a whole different place. There is so much involved with salvation. You need to come to church, because it's going to be the unpacking of all that God has placed in you, all that God has made you to be. As you come to church, you're going to begin to realize who you are. You're going to begin to see yourself differently. You're going to be able to understand the word better. You're going to be able to comprehend the things of God better. You're going to grow in faith. You're going to grow in the knowledge of God. All of this stuff happens when you come to church. Church has to be a priority in the very same way that school has to be a priority for our children. We make our children go to school because we want them to be educated. We understand that education is important, it's vital, it's necessary for their success. And so we make going to school a priority for our children. Get up, it's time to go. Why? Because you need to get an education. You got to learn how to read and write and do math and all these different things you need to learn. And I can't teach you, so you need to go where somebody can teach you these things. Church is the same thing. It's the very same thing. Because you have entered into something that you don't have a full knowledge of. And so now you want to come to church so you can begin to understand what you have entered into. What does it mean to be a child of God? What does it mean to be born again? What does it mean to be righteous? How do I serve God? How do I live right? How do I walk upright before God? All of these are issues that we deal with in church. That's why church is so important. That's why Bible study, Sunday school are so important, because it's an opportunity where we can unpack the things of God. Amen. The man says here, you got to be, you must be baptized. So baptism then, number one, is not an option. It's not something that you decide to do. It's not something you decide to do. It's something that he tells you to do. So number one, it becomes important because he tells you to do it. Because the King of Glory said do it. So because if there was nothing else, that's enough to do it. The very fact that he said do it is enough for you to do it. If there was no other benefits, and there are other benefits, but if there were, must do. He must be baptized. He must be baptized in the name of Jesus. Why are we baptized in the name of Jesus? Because we are being baptized or made one with him. We are becoming one with his death. There were many different baptisms of the Old Testament. There was baptism of repentance. There was baptism from sin. There were different baptisms. But now we are talking about the baptism of Jesus. This is very important. There's an issue in Scripture where the men were talking, and he was asking, say, have you been baptized or have you received the Holy Ghost? He said, we haven't even heard that there was a Holy Ghost. He says, well, what have you been baptized in? He said, we were baptized in the baptism of John. That's as far as they had went. And that was good for them until a new revelation came, a new understanding came, and now he says, now that was good for them, but you got to go further now. Because there is another baptism that has been made available, and that is the baptism of the Holy Spirit being brought into the fullness of God. What we're talking about right now is the baptism of Christ being brought into one or into a union with Christ, being made one with Christ. Now, why is this important? Because Jesus goes through some things that we need to understand that we were made a part of. And water baptism is symbolic of that. The power of water baptism is that it symbolizes, it is the physical example or the physical showing of what God has done to my heart. Water baptism is the physical example or the physical showing of what God has done by the Spirit to my heart. Okay, let's go to the book of Romans. Water baptism. Should I be baptized? Absolutely. If you have given your life to Christ, you need to be baptized. It is not an option. It is a command. He commands us to be baptized. There's only two commandments of the New Testament. There are only two commandments of the New Testament. The first one is water baptism. The second one is communion. These are things that we must do. These are not things that we have an option of doing. We must do them. You must be baptized and you must take communion. He does not tell us how often we take communion. It's up to you, but it must be a part of your life. Communion, the breaking of bread, drinking of blood, must be a part of your Christian life because it is what he has commanded us to do. All of the other rituals that they had have been done away with through Christ. All of the other ceremonies and shedding of blood and all of the other things that they did have been done away with through the shedding of Christ's blood. He has become the fulfillment of all those things. But water baptism and communion, these are two things that still stand right now today. All right. Go down to, we'll start at verse number 1. We got a lot of reading. I'm going to press it. Romans, the 6th chapter, starting at verse number 1. I'm going to push. This is Paul writing. Paul has just got through teaching about grace. Verse number 1 says, what shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid, how shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? Know ye not that as so many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death? Therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. Paul has taught grace so good to the point where they're saying, well, if grace is so powerful and so awesome the way it is, then we can continue on in sin. Paul says, God forbid. No, you can't continue on in sin. Matter of fact, he says, how can someone who has died continue in sin? How can someone who has died? Now, this is a new understanding that Paul is beginning to give to the body of Christ. How can someone who is dead continue on in sin? See, they didn't realize that when you come to Christ, you have to die. You have to die when you come to Christ. He begins to teach him. He says, listen, know you not that when you were baptized, let me read it from you, for you. He says, verse number 3, know ye not that so many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death. He says, don't you understand? How can you talk about continuing on in sin? Don't you realize that when you were baptized, when you gave your life to Christ, that you were made one with his death? You were made one. You were baptized, submerged, made one with his death. You became one with Christ. When he died, you died. So how, if you are dead, can you continue on in sin? It's impossible. He says, how can you even think that way? Don't you realize that when you gave your life to Christ, you were made one with his baptism? You were made one with Christ. You're one with him. And when he died, you died. When you died, you lost or you were severed from your tie to this world. We talked about this a little bit in Sunday school. When you died to this world. You are no longer a part of this world. You are a new creation now. You are a born-again believer. You are born of God. Your allegiance to this world is dead. You have a new country now. How can you continue to sin when you have a new country? How can you continue to live in sin when you have a new government? This world is not your home anymore. Your government is in heaven now. Amen. Your home is in heaven now. So I need you to conduct yourself like people of heaven. I need you to talk like people of heaven. I need you to behave like people of heaven, not like people of the world. I need you to be in the world, but not of the world. Have you ever noticed how people from other countries, when they come over here, they still speak their language? They still eat whatever kind of food they ate over there. They still have their flag, whatever flag they have. They love their country. They still have an allegiance to their country. You ever notice that? The same way, listen to this, the same way that they love their country, talk the language of their country, eat the food of their country, dress the way their country dress, is the same way that we as Christians ought to dress the way our country dress. He says have modest apparel. The people down here wear tight clothes. The people up there wear modest apparel.
My God, my God. Amen.
See, we got a different country now. The people down here lie and cuss. The people up there speak holy.
Yes, yes.
The people down here steal. The people up there don't steal. We got a new country.
Yes.
Lord Jesus.
The people down here talk one way. The people up there speak a holy language. He given every one of us a special language, a holy language. Your spirit is able to commune directly with him. It is the language of my country.
Yes. Jesus.
Oh God.
Yes, yes.
God says your mind don't even know how to pray. Your mind don't even know how to communicate with me because your mind has been contaminated by this word, but I'm going to give you a new language. And if you pray from this language, it's going to bypass your mind. It's going to be your spirit and my spirit fellowshipping together. It's the language of my country. It's the holy language. It's the language of mysteries. It's the language of wisdom. It's the language of power. It's the language of authority. Oh, when I pray in the Holy Ghost, things change. Things are broken when I pray. And the things that I can't change with my hand, but when I pray in the Holy Ghost, they change. It's the language of my country. It's the language of it's a powerful language. It's a holy language. Somebody say, well, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to my Father. I'm talking to the King of my country. I'm talking to my Lord and Savior. You're not supposed to understand it. If it was meant for you to understand it, he would give you the interpretation or give me the interpretation. But this right now is not for you. This is between me and him. I'm praying because I need a breakthrough. I'm praying because I need wisdom. I'm praying because I got some stuff that needs to come down in my life. That's why I'm praying. You don't have to understand. He understands. It's a holy language. It's the language of my people.
Thank you.
It is our culture. See, there is a culture to Christianity. There's a culture. You understand what culture is? There's a culture to being a Christian. There's a way we live. There's a way we conduct ourselves. There's a way we carry ourselves. That's the way we move about. That's the way we live in this world. We have a culture. See, sometimes we go around some people that are not from this country and just see the way they operate. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot. Go around and just see how they operate. See how they communicate with each other. See how they commune together, fellowship together, draw strength from each other. See how they get together and eat from the same pot. See how they get together and have the same fellowship. One mind come into a community and change their mind. we have a culture. Holiness, that's our culture. It's the behavior of our community. It's the way we live in heaven. It's our culture. Holiness is the culture of the righteous. It's the way they live. It's the way they conduct themselves. Holiness is natural for us. That's why God said, be ye holy because I'm holy. If you come from me, then being holy should be normal to you because I'm holy. Be ye holy because I'm holy. It's our culture. It's normal for a black man to eat black-eyed peas, collard greens, cornbread. That's normal. That's his culture.
Yes.
He grew up eating that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It's normal.
Yes.
I remember when me and my wife first started dating or living together. She made some stuffing.
It was good.
I ate a bite of that stuffing.
It was out of the box.
I said, oh no. This ain't no stuffing right here. See, you can't play with stuffing with me. This ain't no stuffing right here. That thing had so many different flavors. It was like an explosion went off in my mouth. See, I'm used to cornbread with the chicken broth and the chicken meat and the green, the onions and all that stuff mixed up in the cornbread. And see, that's stuffing to me. So when you say stuffing, that's what I'm thinking. See, I want you to understand how we have a culture
That's right.
as Christians that is unique to us as Christians. You can't look to the world to understand the way you live and the way you think. Because what we have is unique to us.
Yes.
In the very same way where you can have another race of people, you don't understand what they're saying, you don't understand why they eat what they eat. It is their culture. So when you understand that, why would you allow the world to dictate to you your culture? How do you want to let the world tell you what a Christian is?
That's right.
How you going to let the world tell you how a Christian lives, how a Christian should behave, how a Christian should think, how a Christian should move, how a Christian should raise their... How are you going to allow the world to tell you your culture? Not so, not so. You can't tell me what I am. Not if you haven't come from glory. The only person who can tell me who I am is one who has come from glory. That's Jesus. That's why he gave me the word. He gave me the word to let me know who I was, to let me know where I come from, to let me know how I behave, how I think, how I act, how I should feel, how I should deal with his word. He left me the Constitution. He left me the rules. He left me the revelation of where I come from.
Yes.
See, oh God, you existed before you were born.
Amen. That's right.
You existed before you were born. Your birthday, your natural birthday was not the first day you exist. You existed in God before you were ever born.
Yes.
You were in God before the foundation of the world. You were in God. You were a part of him. Woo! You were a part of God before your mother and daddy ever came together.
Hallelujah.
You came from him.
Thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah, God. Thank you, God.
You came out from him.
Yes.
You were a part of him.
Hallelujah.
Jesus came to reconcile, to bring us back to where we were. Okay, let me move.